The sport of cycling and events on a bike have been popular since the late 1800s in the US, and we've seen different waves of popularity from road to mountain, Le Mans to Lance, and now all things off road. I brought in someone who's been around the sport for decades, anything from behind the bars himself to hosting national events, and he's here to shed some light on why these trends are happening and where they're going. Our guest today, Micah Rice. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is super fun. You and I actually go way back, and we'll get into some of that. But for those of our listeners who don't know you as well as I do, who is Micah?
Well, I've been part of this sport for a long time. I started out kind of my introduction to cycling was through collegiate racing at the University of Georgia, and kind of started racing bikes during my time there in Athens, Georgia. And when I graduated, I decided to continue kind of racing bikes instead of jump into what I was supposed to do, which is teach high school English, interestingly enough. Uh, so I had a part-time job working on some events there in the Southeast and raced my bike. Got to the point where I raced for a UCI professional road team. Uh, wasn't very good, so decided I was going to have to do something different if I was going to stay in the sport. And so decided to start my own cycling team. So I had a couple of cycling teams that were based there in Georgia. My men's team was sponsored by Jittery Joe's Coffee.
Yeah,
So
it's a
that
great team.
lasted probably 7 years. And then I had a women's team, also kind of a very high domestic level road team, sponsored by Aaron's Corporate Furnishings. So that was kind of my next part of the sport. And then in 2009, I moved my family to Colorado Springs to take a job at USA Cycling. So I oversaw the national events department for USA Cycling. Gosh, I guess it was about a little over 8 years. So
Yeah, yeah,
2009 to 2017, I ran the national events department. So overseeing all the calendars for all of the disciplines, and then of course 15 to 17 national championship events per year in all five of the disciplines of cycling. So that was that was kind of a big step. I left USA Cycling in 2017 to work with OC Sport and help develop their Oat Route events in here in North America, and spent some time doing that. And now I've spent, gosh, I guess about a year and a half working for Sports Strategies. So Sports Strategies is kind of a sports tourism consulting company. It's actually based
hmm
in Birmingham, and I was brought on for the event development side. So Sports Strategies does a number of things in the consulting, kind of the sports tourism consulting world. And so when there is maybe a city or a region that's looking to bring in sports tourism, then I make recommendations on either building an event or bringing events into that region. And so lately I've been trying to build, I've been working to build events from scratch. So that's kind of my there you go. That's my whole background
yeah.
in the sport, and it's been great.
Well, do you ever regret not going into teaching English right away, or were you sitting
Yeah,
there?
I think back upon that, and as much as I thought that would be fun, I think I'm pretty happy with where I ended up. I'm very lucky in that I get to work in sport, and especially a sport that I personally love and enjoy. So I feel pretty lucky with where I've landed.
Yeah, no, it's and you've got an interesting, background from not only, racing yourself to leading some high-end teams. I mean, that women's team that you were directing, I mean, you had some big sluggers on that team.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of riders. In fact, um, I actually had to share a lot of them with the national team. That was back when USA Cycling was doing these national teams, and often I'd be without a roster of women because half of them would be over in Europe racing for Team USA. So very strong group of women, and definitely some heavy hitters there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And very, I mean, very road centric and UCI centric for many years, and that's where you and I cross paths, or our Venn diagrams kind of came in to be
Hmm.
there. And during that time, I mean, we're really focused on kind of the governance and putting on a very official event and things like this. But the market is moving a little bit away from that. Can you tell us what
It
you're
is.
seeing in that regard, and maybe start to shed some light on why it's occurring?
Yeah, and obviously we've seen a really odd set of circumstances with the pandemic in this last year, and I think it's going to be to be seen, I'd say, in terms of how that also plays into the change that we've seen in U.S. racing. But as we all know, road cycling was really a sport born in Europe, and the United States has always kind of put its own feel and its own kind of ways of doing things with cycling, but its roots really are based in the Tour de France and a lot of the things going on there. So you've seen the United States try to copy Europe in a lot of ways, and that's one of the ways that we've seen a lot of UCI racing come to North America and do well in North America in whatever discipline that might be. Obviously road racing. Mountain biking was really born here in the United States, and we've kind of seen that seep into Europe and do really well. And that's kind of changed the sport as well of that side of cyclocross. We saw um, kind of that it's kind of a niche sport of a niche sport in a lot of ways, but we've UCI cyclocross racing was huge. In fact, when I was at USA Cycling, people were fighting over weekends of when they could put on a UCI cyclocross race, and that's really changed here in the last 3 or 4 years. So uh, we've definitely seen that rise in what we've in how the United States has related to the UCI and kind of that globalization of cycling. But I think in the last few years we've really seen the United States kind of flex its muscles in terms of where the United States sees the sport going and being able to kind of um, put our twist on the entire sport.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's an interesting observation. I totally agree. So what's our flex on it?
Well, I think one of I think the way we've seen a lot of our events move off road.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I probably am similar to others where I had a cyclocross bike and I used it a little bit for cyclocross, but then started riding a lot of whether it be easy single track or dirt roads, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is way better than when I, in the 90s when I used to ride my road bike on all these dirt roads. This is way more comfortable. The industry has provided a tool for me to do, to ride these dirt roads when I, on a bike that's actually made for them. And I think a lot of people on the road have started to, for various reasons, and that have already probably been called out, have been kind of moving off road with their road riding, types of things. It's a little bit farther out there. They're less traveled by cars. We've seen a lot of incidents with riders getting hit with cars as the busier our roads get. Um, we've we've seen people really want these, air quotes, epic experiences out, away from people and traffic, and dirt roads get us there faster.
yeah.
And so we've seen a lot of these kind of things, the road stuff really move off road. And, indeed, the UCI is very road centric. I mean, if you look at what really drives cycling in Europe, which is the home of the UCI, it still is the tour. And, that's going to really be a focal point for them. And, but seeing so many people kind of get involved in the sport and jumping in, and, and they're not necessarily involved in just watching the Tour de France. They're much more involved in whether it be mountain biking. We've seen what Micah has done to the growth of mountain biking and that side of the sport. And there's just been a number of things like that, and a number of organizations, I think, that have really started to push the American sport more off road and away from really what the UCI is focused on.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting angle on it, and I think that definitely spot on with what my athletes are interested in, right now. And also,
Sure.
you go back to where you're still living in Colorado Springs. I lived there for about 9 years,
Hmm.
and some of my most favorite rides were riding with Jim Lehman, exploring kind of like eastern Colorado. But we'd start in Colorado Springs, we
Hmm.
venture out, he'd drag me out on some gravel road, and the more we got out there, it was just ranching. It was less cars, less vehicle, less people, and ended up being 80 to 120 epic mile loops, and you come back cracked and go to Chipotle and tell the war stories afterwards on Monday.
Yeah,
And
and that's what people are wanting. I think that we're starting to see, you know, when you talk about cycling participation, I think that people are really focused on that experience side of things, and
yeah, that's it.
they're looking for, what is the ultimate destination. And so when you get people that are choosing which events to go to, um, they're not just choosing a race itself, but they're actually choosing the city or region that it's in, because they want to do other things rather than just ride ride that bicycle or do that race. So I think that's where people start. When they start making decisions with their pocketbook, that's those are the decisions they're making.
Yeah, yeah, definitely important decisions. And I think again, when I'm training athletes for that, is some of them that are, say, not super race centric, is like, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do within 4 weeks of deciding it, kind of thing.
Sure,
Where it's like, I want to be
sure,
diverse, I want to have that experience, I want to be able to go big, mix it up, change it up. And then also, sometimes it's bring the family along with it too, because if it is in a cool location, make a vacation out of it.
exactly,
You know,
exactly.
yeah,
And people are kind of looking for those bucket list things, and they start thinking about, and again, I think that even social media has driven some of this. You see some Instagram from, I don't know, Alpe d'Huez or something like that, and you're like, I'd love to go ride that. I gotta go ride that.
mhm,
I want a selfie at the finish line of the classic Alpe d'Huez finish, of the Tour de
yeah,
France, or, oh, what an amazing ride that is above Malibu, and I want to go ride in the valleys above Malibu, and because I've seen pictures of that, and celebrities posting their own photos of doing those things, and so it's been really good for me, 8 years at USA Cycling, and really being tied into those UCI events, national championship events, where it's kind of all about the win. It's all about the the jersey, which is a fantastic thing to go after, or as far as the UCI is trying to make these events, UCI sanctioned, and that kind of gives you that global perspective. But being able to leave USA Cycling and start to see kind of that other side of the sport, and see the rise of gravel, and see some of the things that, like, Epic Rides is doing in the world of mountain biking. I mean, all of those things were eye opening for me, and it's a whole new different group of people doing them. And both worlds have their place, right? And they do
Oh yeah.
intersect at times for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
But for me, being able to work at the national governing body and then start working on events like Oat Route, like the Pikes Peak APEX, like the Steamboat Gravel event, being able to kind of live in that world is has really been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, it's a cool world for sure, and I would be, I think, just mention the tech behind it as well. Like back when, say, Jim and I were riding, or you were riding your
Mhm.
cyclocross bike, we were on road bikes, and you're exploring these roads, and gets really chattery at times, right? So now, amazing gravel bikes being put out there, and even say a cross country mountain bike has come a long way with a full suspension,
Sure,
but super stiff, lightweight to be able to cover all the distance, climb the fire road, and rip that gnarly descent, like you mentioned, epic rides courses tend to do in that regard. So it's like these machines are becoming far more capable to deliver the experience that the end user wants,
absolutely.
and it's really fun to be part of that too.
Sometimes the industry, is actually a real bellwether for where events are going. I remember a number of years ago, and this is while I was at USA Cycling. And again, I was very focused on what my job was at that time, which was really
Yeah.
national championships. And I remember looking at a Trek catalog, and it was like that literally in 12 months they had gone from like a couple of cyclocross offerings to a full range of gravel bikes. And I'm just like, what the heck? I mean,
Hmm.
what do they think is going on here? Like, are they selling these? Like, and that's what's in my head. And this is years ago, and sure enough, I mean, these guys knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly where things were going. They knew exactly what people wanted. They knew what was selling and what would sell. And so, often, the industry is right there, or even a step ahead of some of the rest of us, and where events are headed.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And we talked about one day events, we talked about multi-day events. I want to drill down and talk about two events in particular that you're the race director of. And first, start with Steamboat Gravel, because I think that has been a trendsetter in itself, and with what Amy Charity has done in the direction of gravel racing. For those who I guess may have never heard of that, can you tell more of what that event is, how it's changed the playing field a little bit, and your involvement in that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I came on board as race director beginning of this year, and there was a there was Amy needed some help with kind of operations and logistics. She has an incredible team there in Steamboat Springs, so it's really
She
been
does.
fun to
Yeah.
to jump in, and she's got an event that is just amazing. I mean, if you take a look at the history of the event, it's only happened once, yet is still considered really one of the top three or four gravel events in the world at that point. And they opened registration just this last December, and they filled up their 3,000 spots in about 9 minutes. So it gives
Incredible.
you an idea of how quickly these are selling out and what the demand is for that type of event. But I think what Amy has done has been really interesting. I mean, we've seen these gravel events kind of pop up. They've been around for a long time. I remember hearing about the Barry Roubaix in Michigan a long time ago. It's some of these events have been going on forever. And if you look at Unbound Gravel, it used to be Dirty Kanza, and now it's Unbound Gravel, owned by Lifetime. It's been around a long time as well. uh, I think what Amy has done is kind of taken that event that's kind of that epic bucket list, fend for yourself kind of event, and she's made it a little bit more accessible to a lot of different people. The roads, aren't crazy difficult. You're not going to be, flatting every 10 miles. And some of these things are just impossible that you see out there.
Yeah.
Um, the aid stations are fully stocked. You can go out of there and just kind of fill up your pockets and you're good to go. You don't have to carry a lot on your bike with you. You're not necessarily needing to be self-sufficient. And there's, a bunch of different distances. And she's really done an incredible job of opening this event up to a very diverse group of people. Uh, just like the Pikes Peak APEX, she offers equal prize money for men and women. And she's done a really great job, I think, really kind of trying to make sure that a very diverse group of riders shows up for this event, and opportunities do happen for people who might not be able to register in that first 9 minutes. Uh, we work with very closely with Ride for Racial Justice, and we've opened up a bunch of spots that we're trying to, that we're kind of helping fund um, for people that are from different backgrounds, BIPOC people, and we've kind of filled up those spots. And we're going to do a special ride on Friday with, that they're going to be hosting. And I think the idea kind of behind trying to find more people that can access this sport. Here, I'm kind of your typical bike rider in the United States, right? I'm kind of this
Hmm.
middle-aged white dude, and
Hmm.
we've got plenty of those. But I think the way we grow the sport and make it stronger is we attract more people than just people like me. And I think that's something that Steamboat Gravel has done an incredible job of.
Yeah, yeah, and I was just gonna say, I mean, it's like, okay, something that sells out, in 9 minutes, and if you don't have fast internet, you don't really know how the game is played. The middle-aged white man say does, right? I
Sure.
think reserving some spots and including more opportunity to get more people into it and experience it, that's really gonna grow the sport in a great way, for
Yeah,
sure.
no, absolutely, absolutely, and so I think that her real focus on parity and accessibility, is one of the reasons why it's so popular. I think that it goes beyond just a bucket list event. It's an event that you get excited about every year. And I think that one of the things I talked about before, the experience of being out on the Steamboat Springs dirt roads are just gorgeous. I mean, you're out in the middle of Colorado.
I was gonna say,
Uh,
and it's an amazing place.
it's an unbelievable destination, and just these rolling hills through this agricultural land in Colorado, where you're just out there and the views around you are just unbelievable, and you really do feel like you are out in the middle of nowhere, but you get to stay in like a world class ski resort town. I mean, Steamboat
Yeah.
Springs, there's so much to do. There's hot springs that you can visit. There's tons of stuff for your entire family. You can make a week of it. You can eat fast food, or you can eat at a 5-star restaurant each night if you want to. And so that kind of relates back to a destination that people can really buy into, and that's what makes those events so popular, is when you can kind of combine all those things.
Yeah, and I don't want to take anything away from, say, the Unbound or Mid South with some of these other events that truly were trend setting too. I mean,
Mhm.
they've been in the business longer in forming, this this market as well. However, it, those things are relentless for sure. Like, you got to make
Yeah,
sure that you're very well trained for that. They're super long. There's a lot of technical stuff that's you know part of those races, and also the weather. Like, if you get a bad year at Mid South, I mean, it's a mud fest, right?
brutal. Yeah,
And stuff can always go sideways in Steamboat, but like, in general, what you're talking about is, course is pretty awesome. The aid stations are well stocked. It's a little bit more straightforward. It's challenging, but not like I'm going to fall off a cliff sort of technical,
sure.
and beautiful
Yeah,
place.
yeah. No, it kind of hits all those things. I mean, no question with something like Unbound. Um, in Mid South. I mean, those are incredible courses, and but you've got to have a support crew out, to help you. You're carrying stuff on your back in a pack. You're making sure you got like 4 or 5 extra tubes because you're probably going to use
Yeah.
them. And again, absolutely a place for those kind of epic events. I mean, there are so many people
for
that want
sure.
to do those. Um, but again, I think back to something like Steamboat, where accessibility. Back to that word, where you don't need a support crew. You can choose the shorter version. You never get that far out of town. Um, a ton of support out in the course, whether that be medical or food and water. Um, and then you can you got a great town to play in before and after. So uh, I think that she's got a really good combination of things there. I'm pretty excited to be part of that event this year.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, you also mentioned another event that some people may not know of either because it is pretty new, and it's called the Pikes Peak APEX. Um,
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
Yeah, no, this has been a fun one. And this kind of goes back to the kind of stuff that we do at Sports Strategies, which is build an event for the ground up for a client. So the Pikes Peak Apex, presented by RockShox. RockShox is the kind of the presenting sponsor. They're actually based. Yeah, all of the R&D for RockShox are based here in Colorado Springs. It's a company owned by SRAM, which is most people know out of Chicago, but all of the R&D for all of the RockShox products is here in Colorado Springs. So they were excited to jump on. But uh, it's a 4-day mountain bike challenge here on the slopes of Pikes Peak. And what we've really tried to do with it is actually combine what we love about mountain biking with what we love about gravel racing. And so, uh, obviously, this last year was the first year. Trying to have the inaugural year in the middle of a pandemic was a little bit of a lift. There was a lot that we couldn't do that we really wanted to do, but we did pull off at least a good bike race here this last September. And uh, what we love about gravel events are those mass starts where you get to you might get to start with all of your teammates, or you get to start with your mom or dad or your spouse or your kid, or whatever you want. You don't, you're like, oh, I'm not racing in a certain category, or he's a pro, or you're riding right next to everybody at the start, and kind of choose your pace. Those are that's one thing we wanted to incorporate into this mountain bike race. We had to do waves this last year, but it's our hope that as soon as we're out of the woods on some of this stuff, that we can do kind of these larger mass starts, just like we would at a gravel event here for this mountain bike race. But the idea is that it's four really good days of mountain biking here, kind of in this Pikes Peak region. So the first day is a very short time trial prologue. So it's in an in-town park, Palmer Park, which is a well-known in-town park here. Um, and it was about an 11-mile thing, and then the next 2 days, Friday and Saturday, are big loops. So these are loops that really get you out into the Front Range, up on the slopes of Pikes Peak, and back to kind of feeling like you're really out there on an adventure. Some of these are dirt roads, plenty of dirt roads to ride on, are not over technical, and you kind of kind of able to see back down into the city of Colorado Springs, but really kind of get up there on the mountain. And then
I, I,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
wanted to just chime in here real quick because people may hear some things about Colorado Springs like, oh, it's not that cool of a town, whatever. But like the mountain bike riding is off the hook there. It is
It's
silly
amazing.
and it is not well known, which makes it even better.
No, you're absolutely right. It's kind of one of those, you know, best kept secrets, as they say. There are a lot of mountain bikers here in town that don't not necessarily want to advertise, but
No,
the people that come and ride here are just blown away by
yeah.
what is here. I mean, just the in-town parks alone that have miles and miles of really well built single track. I mean, go down the list. There's probably 5 or 6 that the city has put a lot of time and energy into, to make sure that there's some great stuff like that you can ride from your house. But if you're willing to do a big loop and you want to ride up Gold Camp and head toward Cripple Creek and then come down, through Jones Park and Captain Jack's, I mean, it's just a massive amount of riding right straight across the front of Pikes Peak, and people are always just blown away by what's here.
Yeah, and just so listeners understand this too that have never been there. I mean, you got Palmer Park that's a little east of the city, and then the elevation is up there a little bit, and then it comes down into the base of the city where it's about 6,000 feet, and then it starts climbing up. And this Pikes Peak that we're talking about, it's a 14,000 foot mountain. Okay, and so we're playing bikes in Pike National Forest around the base of Pikes Peak, and it is one of the most unique areas to ride bikes and like play bikes and do a bike race. So it's a special place for me. I lived there for so many years. My brother and his family still live there, and we're only at stage 3 here, Micah. So let me transition and throw that back to you. What's stage 4 look like in our
Yeah,
nice
well,
little
no,
playground?
yeah, stage four is a little bit shorter because the goal is to have stage four in the morning, and then we kind of have a little bit of a celebration at lunch when everyone's done. So it tends to be more in that 20 to 25 mile range, while those longer courses are more in that 40. We had one course this last year that was closer to 50 miles. But they're not, they're pretty fast courses. So
Yeah.
you're not going to be out there for 8 hours. You're gonna. I think even the longest course last year, I think Russell Finsterwald did it in about 2:45, and then the folks that were coming in at the end were finishing in more like 6 hours. But that's the whole idea. The idea is it's much more like a gravel a gravel race or a Grand Fondo or an Ironman or a marathon where everyone kind of starts together, and we put just as much support into the folks that are straggling and just trying to finish as we do into the people that are right there, winning the prize money. Which of course we're the similar in that we offer equal prize money for men and women. It's the same distance for everybody, no matter what age group or gender. It's the same course every day, and we
And you pay pretty deep on that prize purse too, right?
yeah, it's one of again, back to another philosophy is the people that are probably winning the prize money, and I'll just use the examples of like our winners from last year, Russell Finsterwald and Chloe Woodruff. They race for teams that pay them pretty well, and they're making a living. But it's that person that's like just trying to get 10th, 11th place. And we try to pay at least 15, and so those are the people that really need the help, right? Those are the people. And I was there in my racing days where it's like, I'm sleeping in the car because I gotta race that crit the next day, and I don't feel like dropping $75 on a hotel room. Uh, Not that we have
For
a lot of
sure.
people sleeping out in the cars here in Colorado Springs, but those are the people that really are going to be appreciative of winning, even a few $100s back in the end. So we do pay pretty deep. Um, and so, and we do a lot of support. Again, similar to what we do at Steamboat Gravel, we've got aid stations every 10 to 14 miles, and you can stop, fill up a water bottle, grab some food, and then jump back on your bike and keep going. So you don't need someone to help you out there. We've got one of our sponsors is the local Subaru dealership, Huberger Subaru, and they've got riders out there who are literally like making sure everyone's good, and like, oh, do you need a snack, or did you get, if you got a flat, I got an extra tube. There's kind of these Subaru support riders that are out there on the course helping out. So we really work hard to try to make sure we're kind of egging on those last finishers, and that everybody all the way down has really good support.
Yeah. Now, I like that a lot, and I think it speaks back to that people wanting different experiences around the country, different experiences around the world, and for me, say when I'm coaching my athletes, and people are like, "Oh, I want to do Breck Epic, or I want to do Cape Epic," these week long, like truly epic stage races, and those two are
Oh
some of
yeah.
my favorite that I've ever done in my life. However, I've spent a lot of time on a mountain bike, and I've raced around the world, and those are very challenging. And so when
Yeah.
people haven't even say done a mountain bike race beforehand, or they've done a few single day, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna do Cape Epic. It's like, let's find a little intro first, and it's usually,
Right.
I'll
Right.
steer them toward a Breck Epic 3 day, or this is like the sweet spot, in my opinion, because you get to grind it out on the long climbs and hit some sweet descents on the
Hmm.
way down.
Yep.
And back when
Yep.
I was living there, riding with Russell and Danny and Kalen, it was everything that I could to time trial up and keep with them. And then they would just drop me like a bad habit coming down Jones's, and I try not to die. But it was, just incredible riding. And it's really, it is hard to find. So trying to do it on your own, I don't think is necessarily the easiest. So doing something like this is great. You have that really good experience. You ride in a different location, but it sets you up to go to that bucket list event.
Exactly. We're
That's
seeing
kind
a
of the point.
lot of people kind of come off of road racing and get into gravel racing. I think the
Mhm.
majority of gravel racers are coming into the sport through road racing. Definitely
Yeah.
some from the mountain bike side as well, of course. But I think that we're seeing again. We just talked about that kind of that trend of moving from the road off the road into gravel. The goal with the Pikes Peak Apex is that um, it's that next transition period. Okay, you've tried the gravel, you enjoy that, that worked out for you. You might have bought a mountain bike, but you're not sure you want to jump into Breck Epic. You mentioned that one again. Fantastic race in
Amazing
Breckenridge.
race. Yep.
They do such a good job with that race, and it's lauded for a reason. But it's really really hard. If you want to
Yeah.
do all 6 days of Breck Epic, you better be ready for some long, really challenging days. The Pikes Peak Apex is the idea is that it is that transition, right? You want something different. There's a lot of wide open riding. One of the stages on Friday this last year, a couple people actually rode a gravel bike because they
Well,
climbed up Rampart Range and they did a loop around the Rampart Reservoir and back. It's a 50-mile loop. Only 14 miles of it was single track. So a few people were like, I'm gonna try to get that advantage, and try to roll a little faster on these faster sections. I'm gonna bring my gravel bike. I don't think they were too happy about going around the
yeah, I was
reservoir
gonna say I wouldn't do that.
on a
I wouldn't
gravel
personally,
bike.
but
Like, but there's a lot of that wide open stuff that you can really So a lot of the power riders were really comfortable. We had two this last year. We had two Xterra world champs, the current world champion from South Africa and an ex-world champion here from Vale that both participated in the Pikes Peak Apex, and they absolutely loved it
that's
because
cool.
they could truly use their just raw power to hang with those front guys. Now again, when they hit Frosty Park and headed down, Jones and Captain Jack's, sure, Russell, dusted them, uh,
Yeah.
but but they were right there and had such a good time. And it wasn't like just rocky descent after rocky descent that just beat them up the whole time. They just really had a fun way to go. So I think it's a little less intimidating an event like the Apex
Mhm.
versus some of these other multi-day mountain bike events.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And we mentioned Russell a few times. I feel like we gotta spend a few minutes on him.
Sure.
Yeah, he's a great friend. Known him for years, since he was like 15, I think. But Russell Finsterwald, he's a professional mountain bike racer. He's local there in Colorado Springs. But I mean, he's been around the sport high levels, but also, I mean, he was really influential in getting this thing off the ground for you, right?
He really was. And Russell's one of those people that when we first started working with this, and what a lot of people don't know, and I haven't mentioned yet, is that the Pikes Peak Apex is actually owned by a nonprofit here in town, the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. And they are kind of the people that kind of helped have the vision behind it. But when we were trying to build what we thought we really wanted here, Russell was one of those people that kind of instrumental in kind of sitting down and walking through, not just what we thought would be fun for us, but what we really thought would make for a destination event here in Colorado Springs. one that matched up with the assets that we had here and the trail system that we had, but also trying to figure out where's the sport going and what that looks like. And Russell, as someone who was born and raised here in Colorado Springs, but he's the current marathon mountain bike national champion. He was kind of the perfect person to talk to about an endurance mountain bike event here in Colorado Springs, and I was able to bounce a lot of stuff by him when it came to courses, um, and um, and really work hard to kind of figure out what we needed to do and what we needed to create here. In fact, again, we didn't really advertise it, but the entire first year, he was the guy behind the social media. He ran all of our social media accounts
I
straight
didn't know
through
that. That's awesome.
2020, and helped us with all of our posts and interviewing other pro riders and helping with content. And so he was able to really jump in there and really get that first year off the ground. And so, yeah, obviously much appreciated. And he knows the trails so well here that, and not to mention, he's the current national champion of endurance mountain biking here in the United States. So he was able to win this event this last year. He didn't have any major problems. Fended off the other pro riders that were here, and he of course is excited about coming back. It's kind of his
Yeah.
hometown event now,
Yeah.
and so he's already registered and ready to go.
Cool. Well, what are some, hopefully, and we are recording this, 2021, pandemic's still going on, shots are getting in the arms of those willing to take them, that kind of thing. But what are some sneak peeks of what you want to do with this race in terms of that festival experience or like the overall experience that you couldn't do during the pandemic?
Yeah, so we there's a lot of things that we wanted to do that we weren't able to do last year. We'd like to get everybody in a room for a pre-race meeting, and go through the courses with everybody. We did that over WebEx, I think, this last year. We'd like to have an after party. We'd like to just like clear out a bar and have some drinks and cheer on the podium finishers and just have a great time after the event is over on Sunday. You know, we again we did a little virtual get together on WebEx, which was fun, but not nearly as much fun as we'd like. It's part of that culture, right? I don't have to tell you. It's getting together after some of these great events and having all the war stories and sharing them and together with food and drink is just kind of one of those great traditions that I think that people really appreciated and love as part of the experience. Um,
Mike, I'm envisioning Mile High Saloon is taken over by
there
Pikes
it
Peak
is.
Apex. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Pack that thing.
I will come. I will
All
come
right.
if it happen if the post race party happens there.
Yeah, we're in. And then we want to create a fairly large scale expo that is attached to this. So again, back to Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance, they are all about everything outdoor recreation. So
Yeah.
while they're definitely have are using this mountain bike event as a way to shine a spotlight on their organization and what they do and kind of that trail system on the slopes of Pikes Peak. They're involved in anything outdoor recreation, which can be anything from Jeep tours to zip lines to fishing to hunting to ATVs, balloon rides. I mean, all of these things are outdoor recreation and things that we enjoy and love to do in Colorado. Hiking, of course. So uh, I think they'd like to have a large scale outdoor recreation expo that kind of went along with this. And we were able to do kind of an outside plan and then tie other events into it, right? We've talked about an endurance run. Hey, we've got a single 40-mile loop that we've permitted with the National Forest Service. We got the aid station set up and the course marshals. Why can't we do a run that starts 15 minutes after the cyclists leave? I mean, so those are kind of some of the things we're looking at there. Family events, kids events. One of the things that we're we are looking at for even being able to do this year, was is some women's mountain bike clinics. So bring out some coaches and bring the community in a little bit and do some beginner mountain bike clinics. Maybe a group of women and a group of kids. Obviously, men are invited too. We're gonna. But what can we do to kind of again expand the sport, introduce more people to what we are doing, and just have a great time outdoors. So
Yeah. Love it.
all those are things that we'd like to see happen.
Yeah. Well, kind of on that future forward thinking, I mean, that kind of put you on the spot here. Where do you think we'll be in 5 years with this whole like gravel mountain bike event space? Like, where is all this going? I mean, is the road dead? And is gravel now king in the
I know
United States? And it's just like this big US flex of gravel
it
or what?
makes for a good hashtag.
Yeah.
Road is dead, but I don't think road will ever be dead. I mean, I think that again the the Tour de France is an anchor that's not gonna just be gone in 5 years and 10 years and maybe not even 50 years. And they're again coming. This is my background as a road cyclist, and you can attest to there's nothing just like flying down the road at you know 30 miles an hour in a pack of riders. I mean, you can't
Mhm.
replace that. You can't replace that with a mountain bike ride, maybe with a faster gravel ride, although maybe it's more like 20 miles an hour, instead of 30 to 40. But just the quietness of the road bike and flying down the road in a pack of riders, it's not something that you can replace with anything else. And I don't think that we'll ever just see that be gone. It's a ton of
Yeah.
fun, whether it be crit racing that ends up being a little bit more accessible than say big road racing loops.
Yep.
That's absolutely a possibility. I read a great article just recently in Outside Magazine talking about how Justin Williams' team and what they're doing to kind of drive that criterium, the world of criteriums, which that was the first real bike race I ever watched was the Athens Twilight Criterium. And just if that does not get you excited about cycling, nothing will. By being downtown Athens at night and watching that pro peloton fly by. So I don't think that it'll be gone. We might see criteriums, go farther. We're going to see the technical part of off road riding. I think get even better. I mean, it's so good now. You were mentioning that earlier. It's going to get better, and it's going to get more people interested in being out there. Those big enduro bikes right now that weigh 30 pounds won't be long before they weigh 20 pounds.
Hmm.
So all of these things are just going to bring more access to those trails, and so I don't foresee road leaving. I do see people embracing the off road in the next 5 years even more. But it's very possible we'll see that wrap back around. Right? It's all a circle. If all of a sudden the America has another Tour de France contender, and all of a sudden an American wins the Tour de France 3 times in a row again, we might really see another push back onto the road cycling map. I mean, you just don't know until things like that happen.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, going 30, 40 miles an hour in a group. I mean, that's one scratch of the itch. But I do
Mhm.
think that the off road approach and thinking about in different ways how to scratch that itch, so to speak, for so many different people. I think that's where um, I get really excited with what the United States is doing. Is just thinking differently about how to put these events on, and looking at people like yourself and having people like Amy to really to push that. So
Yeah,
I hope it continues, no matter if we're high up in the Tour de France or not. So
yeah.
um,
And one thing we haven't discussed is just kind of the rise this last year in virtual events. You
Oh
know,
yeah, gosh.
we watched the pandemic kind of fast forward that for us, and everyone. I mean, I participated in a couple of virtual events this last year because that's what was available to us, right? And whether
Yep,
that be
exactly.
a challenge that you're in person, like doing a Strava challenge, trying to beat a Strava time or beat others on a Strava section, all the way to a Zwift race,
I had
whatever
two
that might
athletes
be.
Everest on Zwift this year.
Yeah, it's nuts, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, and I think without question, uh, those virtual events are here to stay. I think
yeah.
that's going to be
Agreed.
something that we'll
Agreed.
always see. I think that we're going to see a lot more people. I mean, that again, you talk about scratching that itch. People want to get out and do events, real in life, in person events, so badly. You can't replace those with a Zwift ride. Or a solo ride where you're trying to win Strava KOMs. But I think there'll always be a way to connect these events um, to what is going on in person. I've seen a number of people do it really well. Grand Fondo National Series has done it really well. I think Rebecca Rush with Rebecca's Private Idaho has
Hmm.
done a really good
Hmm.
job of kind of incorporating, some of the stuff that she does in with live in person events. And I think it's going to get even better as people kind of figure out what that looks like and what people are excited about. So I see that as being something that feels new, but I see it having a place for a long time.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed with that. Well, to bring all this home, Micah, and to kind of leverage your past experience and all the years in dedication you've really had in this sport, I got a series of questions that I want to wrap up with and give our listeners some actionable stuff
Right.
here to take home. So, i- first of all, in all the years of doing this, what's the number one thing that you see athletes not prepared well for these off road events?
Hmm. Um, I think when people kind of get out there and they bite off more than they can chew, I think you can probably put those in two categories: fuel and clothing. I think fuel is the obvious one, right?
Hmm.
Whenever I participate personally in one of these things, I always kind of try to tend to eat and drink as much as I can. And some people, it's really easy to forget to do this, especially if you're focused on performance and your goal of getting to the finish. So fuel is the obvious one, whether it be bonking or getting dehydrated. And especially when we're talking about something like the Pikes Peak APEX, you're talking a multi-day event. You're fueling for the next day too, not just the day that you're currently on. So I don't have to tell you're an expert in
I was
this
going to
as
say you
much.
could have been a coach, Micah. This is great.
You know about this better than I do, but I think that is one of the things. But I'll tell you, I lived in Georgia for many years, and it's not quite as big of a deal there. Once in a while, you'll hit a rainstorm, but it stays pretty warm. But man, living here in Colorado,
It's different.
I am literally like in July, I'm riding my mountain bike and I might only be going for a 2 hour ride, but I'm bringing a jacket. In July,
Just
I
going to say,
am
yep,
stuffing a jacket in my back pocket because I
yep,
absolutely never know I mean, I could easily get up high enough where it's snowing or
yeah,
rain comes in and it drops to 40 degrees and it can get really bad. So I think whether it's an event or just a training ride, uh, those are the two things I always like have to kind of make sure that I've got all the stuff I need.
yeah. That's really good advice. For people doing Leadville, I'd always say your greatest success on race day, regardless of how good your training was or how bad your training was, your greatest success is your nutrition and hydration.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And I think it applies for, high altitude or low altitude or whatever. But yeah, that's a really good response. Second question to you. Can athletes train mostly on Zwift for these, or sorry, can athletes train mostly on Zwift and road events and still do something like Steamboat Gravel? Or do they actually need to put in some dirty miles too?
I think I I think majority, yes. I mean, I think that if you've got some level of skill riding on an off road surface like gravel or you know, easy. I call it easy single track, right? You know, stuff that's not full of rocks, big rock drops or anything. Smooth single track. You can jump into something like Steamboat Gravel and be totally fine. I would always recommend that you know, try to go out there and ride on gravel with a group, just so you
Mhm.
understand what it feels like. Um, because I think jumping on, you know, for jumping from Zwift onto, say, a road time trial, almost equal, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, you got to deal
Yep.
with a little
Agree.
bit of this and a little bit of that. If you have to go around a corner or something like that, you have to think about it a little bit more than you would on Zwift. But I think the biggest disconnect is, what does it feel like when you're going around a corner on gravel with people around you, and what that looseness feels like? And you can't feel that in a road event or on Zwift.
Wow. Yeah. That's the best piece of advice for sure. Man, I'm
Sometimes that
really,
that
really
that
stoked with
two
your
wheel
answers, Micah.
slide will freak you out.
Oh yeah, the swerve, man. Like, you got to be real comfortable with that swerve, and then you got a lot of that in Colorado Springs too, so you get a lot of practice.
Indeed, indeed.
All right, third question. Based on last year, what would you say is the number one thing that people should train for if they want to come and do the Pikes Peak Apex? And would that apply to any mountain bike stage race?
Yeah, mountain bike stage races are different everywhere you go. There's actually not a lot of mountain bike stage races right
It's
now
not a
in the
ton.
United States.
Yeah,
When you really
it's not a
start
ton.
thinking about it and you start,
Mhm.
you know, ticking them off, I mean, you know, Breck Epic we've talked about, Pikes Peak Apex
Transylvania,
here.
Pisgah, Pikes Peak,
Yep,
Breck.
got a few. Yeah, but literally, you're
Yes.
not. I bet you can't come up with 8 or 10 right now.
No,
I mean,
I
yeah,
was four.
right. So, but if I, you know, but gravel events, yeah, you could probably name 20 right now,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I
Twenty thousand.
they're fairly yeah, they're fairly unique, and it really kind of depends on where you're going. I mean, obviously the trails that connect in Pennsylvania are going to be way different than the ones that are out here in Colorado. You're dealing with a little bit of altitude up here, although not as much as you would at the Breck Epic. I think that the biggest thing to focus on, I think, are kind of really being able to pace yourself for a really long climb. And stage 3, for example, from last year of the Pikes Peak Apex, and it's the same stage this coming year, literally starts with a 22-mile climb on dirt.
Gold camp.
So yeah, so you're straight up gold camp. You're in Bear Creek, and you do kind of a little bit of like crushed gravel. You jump up onto the road of Gold Camp, so that's pavement. It's pavement for a mile and a half, and then it turns into a gravel road. And then you're on uh, a gravel road that, you know, is built for cars for several miles through several, you know, miles of tunnels, and then boom, it goes into kind of a wide open climb that's not open to cars. So it's kind of like single track, and you're going to go through some more. That's another 7 to 8, 9 miles on that. Then you're going to kind of come up there above where old stage is. I know that you know somewhere some of these places are, so I'm kind of naming them off. And
Hmm.
you kind of some single track, and you're still climbing up 626, that, you know, up to Frosty Park. Uh, and and sure, it's not, none of the climbing that we do in our races are really very steep. It's all just, you've just got to watch that power output, and remember to fuel and just really pace yourself. Kind of get an idea of, you know, what it's like. You're going to climb 4,000 feet in, you know, and what does that look like in terms of how much time you're going to spend on. It's all a lot of it's railroad grade, but but a lot of people get 3/4 through that, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
am still climbing.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if you kind of prepare for that, and even something like that, you can prepare for on Swift, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
just like kind of put it in a gear and just say, I'm going to do this for 2 hours.
Swift
And
is
you,
actually the better kind of platform to do that for most
yeah,
people. right?
Yeah, I mean, and you got to remember for that, the winners are climbing for that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Uh, Other people are taking, 4 or or more to do that climb. Sure, you get to stop. There's aid stations, but just what that mentality and kind of getting used to that, I feel like that's a key piece for the apex.
Yeah, that's again really good advice. And there again, if it's an event in Colorado or the Alps or something like this, people are like, "Oh, well, what's the real difference there?" It's like you might have a 20-minute climb. We got 20-mile climbs. You right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
No,
it's
and we
different.
don't see a lot of climbs that distance in mountain bike racing, so especially on an event like this, it's you're out there for a while.
Yeah, cool, very cool. Well, this has kind of turned into a not so soft plug for the Pike Peaks Apex, but um, if people really are interested in this event, where can they find out more?
Yeah, best spot is our website, pikespeakapex.com. And also for anyone that's made it to the end of this podcast, we do have a special coupon for all the CTS folks. So train right
Awesome.
gets you $50 off if you want to join us there.
Sweet. Well, we'll put the link in our show notes on the landing page, and we'll have that code, train right. I think all capitals, right?
Uh,
Or does it matter?
yeah, it doesn't matter. Train right. We'll get
Train
you
right.
there.
There it is. Okay, folks. So you heard it from Micah. I mean, the future is going off road, a lot of gravel, and a lot of experiential stuff, and that can have some sweet single track along the way. And man, Micah, thank you for taking your time today to talk about where you think all this is going and in some of your events.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Adam. This has been great.
Cool.